So, chapter 6. Okay, this is going a little bit further down the wormhole. Idealism. Okay, so this is where he starts taking it away from the uses of nature and starts just considering philosophical concepts regarding to the natural situation. It says relatively early on in this section, a noble doubt perpetually suggests itself whether this end be not the final cause of the universe, and whether nature outwardly exists. Oh man. Okay, here is where we get into this question of okay, we've talked about all these uses of nature, but is nature actually real? Okay, is this a real thing? Is this something that is actually are there physical things that are real in the world? Like is this pen? I've got a pen here. Is this thing real? Or is it just sort of a figment of my imagination? Am I a figment of my imagination? Or are you a figment of your imagination? Is everybody who you see part of your imagination? Is the chair you're sitting in a real thing? Is the computer that you're watching, is that real, or is it part of your projection? His response to this is he says the frivolous make themselves merry with the ideal theory, ideal being the notion that it's all just ideas, as if its consequences were burlesque, as if it affected the stability of nature. It surely does not. God never jests with us. Okay? So his response to this question of whether it's real is more or less, who cares? Okay? His response, more or less, who cares? Because ultimately, it doesn't really matter whether it's real or not, because it seems real. Okay? It seems real, even if nature isn't really real, even if it is in the Eastern conception what they would call Maya, just an illusion. If it is just an illusion, it doesn't really make any difference because it still seems real. A rock is still hard, water is still wet, whether it is actually real or not. And that's kind of the issue that he brings up. He does say the question of the absolute existence of nature still remains open. So he doesn't shut it down. He doesn't say that it's not worth thinking about. But he does sort of say that, there's no reason to just like devote your whole life to freaking out about this problem because it doesn't, really make that much of a difference. And then he gets to sort of bigger, more interesting questions about how to view the world. He says, the least change in our point of view gives the whole world a pictorial air. A man who seldom rides needs only to get into a coach and traverse his own town to turn the street into a puppet show. Okay, so like it's sort of in our situation, it might be better to go the other way. It's sort of like you probably experience, like you drive around in your car all the time and you never really see anything. But then if you walk in your neighborhood or if you ride a bike in your neighborhood, all of a sudden, all those things that you just sort of drove by sort of achieve like a new meaning. They sort of pop out of the landscape in a, more like freakish, puppet showish kind of fashion. And that he sort of is talking about how that perspective is something that can change. Okay, one of the other really interesting ideas he brings up in this section is a complicated one. It's after he sort of quotes this poetry and some drama, and then he says, it proceeds on the faith that a law determines all phenomena, which being known, the phenomena can be predicted. Okay, so I just want to touch on this real quick because it relates back to this sort of physical concept, this idea, idea called Laplace's demon. Okay, Laplace's demon. This is something Emerson doesn't talk about directly, but it relates to what he's talking about. It's the concept that if you know sort of the position and momentum and all of that of every atom in the universe, you would be able to know all of the past and therefore all of the future. Okay, like physicists and quantum mechanics say that this isn't possible, but it's sort of the philosophical concept, that you would, if you knew all of that, all the position and momentum, you would be able to predict all the future. That's Laplace's demon. Emerson here says it proceeds in the faith that a law determines all phenomena, which being known, the phenomena can be predicted. So you can see how he's sort of touching on that huge, grand idea, which is an interesting thing to consider. Okay, he says it appears that motion, poetry, physical and intellectual science, and religion all tend to affect our convictions of the reality of the external world. Because as he's sort of saying, in many ways, all of these things make us question whether the world is real. He even says regarding religion, the things that are seen are temporal, the things that are unseen are eternal. And that's one thing that religion often puts forth. Like, think of it in Christianity. We are down here in the real world, which is temporal, it's ephemeral, dust into dust, all this vanity, these kind of ideas. And then fundamentally, then there's heaven, which is permanent and eternal and everlasting, right? So there's this, relationship between these things, and that this is something that's sort of put forth and that he talks about in this section. Okay. Uh, Here's a beautiful thing, though. It says that we should sort of look at Christianity in kind of a different way. He says, it sees something more important in Christianity than the scandals of ecclesiastical history or the niceties of criticism, and very incurious concerning persons or miracles, and not at all disturbed by chasms of historical evidence. Okay, and then he's talking about nature. He says, it accepts from God the phenomenon as it finds it as the pure and awful form of religion in the world. That basically, don't look to, church history necessarily for an idea of what God is. To know what God is, open your eyes and then see around you and witness that God as it is everywhere.